He lifted me onto the counter. The cold marble against my skin sent a shiver through me, but his warmth was quick to chase it away. Our eyes met, his gaze deep, questioning, needing reassurance. I gave it in silence, pulling him closer, letting my hands guide him. Clothes fell away between heated kisses, every touch deliberate, every breath shared. When he finally pressed against me, it wasn't just passion, it was release, trust, surrender. Our bodies moved in quiet rhythm, lost in each other, in a moment too intense for words. I clung to him, not just out of desire, but because it felt like coming home. My name is Emily Harper, and this is the story of how everything in my life came undone, and how something unexpected grew out of the wreck. It all began in a quiet, rain-washed corner of Oregon, where the air always smells like pine and the silence is thick enough to drown in. I'm 34 now, living on a stretch of land surrounded by trees and memories I can't quite outrun. 6 years ago, I married Daniel Harper, a man I thought would keep me safe. And for a time, he did. Daniel was 50 when we married. He was strong in that dependable, solid way, like an oak tree that never bends, even in the worst storm. I was 28, worn out from years of unstable jobs, messy breakups, and loneliness that settled into my bones. When he asked me to marry him, I didn't hesitate. I thought, this is what peace feels like. We didn't have a fancy wedding. Just a courthouse ceremony in Tillamook with rain on the windows and a clerk who forgot our names. He gave me a gold band, simple and worn, and I slipped it onto my shaking hand like a promise. We moved into a weathered old farmhouse outside town. It was quiet, creaky, with cedar beams and wooden floors that moaned underfoot. At first, I loved it. We made love on rainy afternoons. We danced in the kitchen to old country records. We tried for a baby, planned names, counted cycles. Each negative pregnancy test was a quiet heartbreak. Daniel would grunt, toss the test in the trash, and say, "Next time." But next time never came. Eventually, we stopped trying. Then we stopped touching. Then we stopped talking. Daniel worked long hours at the mill. I tended to the house, planted flowers out back, bluebells and lupins that grew even in the wettest spring. I read romance novels and imagined what it felt like to be wanted again. Still, I held on. I told myself marriage meant riding out the silences. That love wasn't always fire, it could be warmth, still and steady. Then, last spring, Lucas showed up on our porch. He was Daniel's son from his first marriage, a 19-year-old with a duffel bag and a storm in his eyes. His mother had kicked him out of her Portland apartment after he dropped out of community college. I'd never met him, never even seen a photo, but when I opened the door, I recognized something in him right away, that same ache I carried. That same hollow kind of loneliness. He didn't smile. Just nodded and said, "Hi." I didn't have anywhere else to go. Daniel didn't say much that night. Just grunted, pointed to the attic bedroom, and went back to his beer. But I watched Lucas from across the room as he stood there dripping rain onto the floor, his shoulders hunched like he was used to taking up as little space as possible. He didn't talk much those first few weeks. He kept to himself, took long walks in the woods, stayed in the attic room with his music and sketchbooks. But I noticed him fixing things, the porch step, the broken hinges on the barn door. He didn't say why. He just did it. I began to leave him small things, an extra plate at dinner, a folded blanket on the couch, books I thought he might like. At first, he barely acknowledged them. But slowly, that began to change. One afternoon, I brought him a sandwich while he was working in the barn. He looked surprised. "You didn't have to," he said. "I know," I replied, "but I wanted to." He looked at me for a moment, eyes darker than they should have been for someone so young. "Thanks." That's how it started. Small things. A look held a little too long. A shared joke. Conversations that lasted longer than they should have. He asked questions, listened. Not like Daniel, who had stopped seeing me years ago, but like someone who wanted to know who I was. "You always sound sad when you talk about this place," he said once as we watched the rain. "I'm not sad," I said. "You are. You just hide it better than most." I didn't know how to answer that. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed beside Daniel's back, listening to the wind rattle the windows. I thought about Lucas's eyes, his voice, the way he made me feel seen. Days passed, then weeks. Then one night, everything changed. Daniel was working a double shift at the mill. It was storming hard rain, heavy wind. The lights flickered, then held. I was making chili in the kitchen, the smell of garlic and onions filling the house. Lucas sat at the table, sketching in his notebook, head bent low. His hair was damp from the rain. A little curl fell over his forehead. "Smells good," he said, without looking up. "Hope it tastes that way," I replied. He glanced at me then. His eyes lingered. Something passed between us, thick and unspoken. I served the bowls. We ate mostly in silence. The storm raged outside, making the walls shudder. When I stood to clear the table, his fingers brushed mine. I froze. "Sorry," he said softly. "Didn't mean." "It's okay," I whispered, not moving. He stood slowly. Too close. His breath mingled with mine. I felt it before I saw it, that pull, that gravity. "You shouldn't look at me like that," I said. "How am I looking at you?" "Like you see me." He stepped even closer. My heart thundered. My hand was still holding the edge of the table. "I do see you, Emily," he said, voice barely above the wind outside. "I see everything." I should have stepped away. I should have said no. But instead, I kissed him. And he kissed me back. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't messy. It was slow, like the rain, like the way fire catches when no one's watching. His hands found my waist, mine tangled in his hair. We moved together like we'd done this before in another life. He lifted me onto the counter. The cool surface met my thighs, but his body was warm against mine. He paused, his eyes searching my face for regret. But I didn't stop him. There in that old kitchen, with thunder rolling and my breath caught somewhere between guilt and need, I let go. I let someone touch me like I hadn't been touched in years. It wasn't just the physical, it was the seeing, the hearing, the knowing. After, we sat in the dark kitchen, breathless, stunned. "What did we just do?" I whispered. He didn't answer right away. He just took my hand in his, our fingers trembling. "I don't know," he said finally. "But I don't regret it. I wanted to say I did. That it was a mistake. But I couldn't lie, not to him, not to myself." That night, I cried quietly in bed while Daniel snored beside me. And the next morning, I took a test. 2 pink lines. I stared at them for an hour. My hands shook. My stomach turned. The world tilted. Daniel came home that night with beer and a tired smile. "What's wrong?" he asked, noticing my face. "I'm pregnant," I said. He blinked, stared, then grinned like a boy. "I'll be damned," he whispered. "We did it." I nodded. I didn't correct him. Because I couldn't. Because the man beaming across from me, lifting me off the ground in joy, wasn't the father of my child. Daniel was over the moon. For a man who rarely smiled, he couldn't stop grinning for days. He came home with a bag full of baby clothes and a dusty wooden cradle he'd found at a second-hand store in town. "We'll fix it up," he said, rubbing his hand over the cracked railings. "I'll sand it down, paint it. Maybe yellow or green, neutral." I nodded, numb. Every touch, every plan he made, felt like a lie wrapping tighter around my chest. But I said nothing. I let him believe. Because how could I tell him the truth? How could I look at him and say, "It's not yours"? I told myself I'd wait. Wait until I was sure. Wait until I knew what Lucas wanted. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't waiting. I was hiding. Lucas, on the other hand, changed overnight. He avoided me. No more sketching at the kitchen table. No more long walks with shared glances. He kept to the attic, only coming down to eat or when Daniel asked for help chopping wood. He didn't look at me. And I didn't blame him. The silence between us was louder than any storm. One evening, 2 weeks after I told Daniel, I found Lucas outside behind the barn, chopping logs like the wood had done him personal harm. His shirt was off. His shoulders glistened with sweat under the fading sun. I hesitated, then stepped closer. "Can we talk?" I asked softly. He paused, axe mid-swing. He set it down slowly and turned to face me. His face was guarded. "There's nothing to say." "There's everything to say," I replied. He folded his arms. "You told him it's his?" What else was I supposed to do? Lucas, he was so happy. I've never seen him like that. And I panicked. He looked away, jaw tight. "I'm scared," I whispered. "This isn't just some secret we can keep forever." "Is it mine?" he asked quietly. I swallowed. "Yes, I'm almost certain." He ran a hand through his hair and laughed bitterly. "Of course." I stepped forward, my voice trembling. "Lucas, what happened between us? It wasn't just a mistake to me." "Then why do I feel like I lost you the second it ended?" I didn't have an answer. Because he was right. I reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted. "But I don't want to do it alone. I want you in this baby's life." "And what about Daniel?" "I don't know yet. But the truth is going to come out eventually." He looked at me for a long time. Then his fingers tightened around mine. "Then we better start figuring out how to handle the explosion." The weeks that followed were like living on a fault line, quiet, still, but ready to crack at any moment. I began showing. Daniel would place his hand on my stomach at night and whisper to the baby. He talked about names, about building a treehouse. He said things like "our son" or "when he's old enough for a bike," and every time, it felt like knives behind my ribs. Lucas stayed distant, but present. He helped around the house, drove me to my prenatal appointments when Daniel was working, brought me tea without a word. We didn't touch again, not even a brush of fingers, but every look between us was heavy with unspoken things. One night, Daniel came home early. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, when I heard his boots stop short in the hallway. When I turned, I saw him standing at the entrance to the living room, staring. Lucas was sitting on the couch beside me, holding a mug. Too close. Too casual. The moment froze. "What's going on here?" Daniel asked. My mouth went dry. Lucas stood up fast. "Nothing. Just talking." Daniel's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward, slow and measured. I know what I saw. I tried to speak, but Lucas beat me to it. "I was just asking about her last appointment," he said. "Relax." Daniel turned to me. "Is that true?" I nodded quickly. "Yes." That's all it was. He stared at us for a beat longer, then turned and left the room without another word. That night, he didn't kiss my forehead. He didn't touch me at all. The tension built over the next few days like the pressure before a storm. Then came the night everything fell apart. Daniel had gone into town to pick up supplies. It was late. The wind was howling through the trees. Lucas and I were alone in the living room, the fire casting shadows on the walls. "I can't do this anymore," I said, breaking the silence. He looked up from his sketchbook. "Do what?" "Pretend this is okay. Pretend like we didn't change each other forever." He set the pencil down. His eyes didn't leave mine. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," he said. "Neither did I." "But we did." I nodded. "So what do we do now?" He stood and walked over to me, his hand reaching for mine. We tell him. He deserves the truth. The front door opened. We both froze. Daniel stepped inside, brushing off snow, holding a brown bag. He stopped when he saw us. What's going on? I took a breath. Daniel, we need to talk. What kind of talk? The kind that's going to hurt. He looked between us. Slowly, carefully, then he set the bag down. I told him everything. Not in a rush. Not hysterically. Just the truth. About that night. About the test. About the baby. My voice cracked halfway through, and I reached for his hand, but he stepped back. His face went white, then red, then blank. You slept with my son, he said, like he couldn't believe the words. I never meant for it to happen. I didn't go looking for it, Daniel. I was alone, and what? He snapped. So that makes it okay? No, I whispered. It doesn't. He turned to Lucas. You came into my house, ate my food, and then what kind of man does that to his own father? Lucas didn't flinch. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, Daniel said, voice shaking. You both did. He walked out. No coat. No flashlight. Just out into the night. I didn't sleep. When morning came, I found him in the barn, sitting in the corner with his head in his hands. I should have seen it, he said when I approached. The way you looked at each other. I'm sorry, I said. I never stopped loving you. I got lost. He didn't look at me. I'm not raising his kid, he said flatly. I'm not asking you to, I replied gently. We both knew it was over. The months that followed were hard. Messy. Quiet. Daniel moved into town. The divorce papers came in the spring. Lucas moved into a small cottage down the road, wanting to give me space, but stay close for the baby. I stayed in the farmhouse, alone but not lonely. The baby came in late July. A boy. Lucas was there. He held my hand through the contractions, whispered that I was strong, that I could do this. And I did. When they placed the baby in my arms, I cried harder than I ever had in my life. Lucas stood over me, eyes full of awe and fear and love. We did this, I whispered. He nodded. Yeah, we did. I named him Noah, because it rained the day he was born, and because he was my salvation. And now, when I watch Lucas holding Noah on the porch at sunset, I still feel the weight of everything we lost. But more than that, I feel the hope of what we built from the ruin. This isn't the life I planned. It's messier, harder, but it's mine, and for the first time in years, I feel seen.